Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Lovely to have you here. Today's story is titled Camping Alone. Let's get into it, shall we? As the last flames licked across the fire and faded, leaving a warm glow from the embers below, I drank the last warm swigs of tea from my canteen and thought about heading to sleep. The stack of firewood by my camp would remain unburned until the morning. My camp was a tarp tied up with paracord to the surrounding trees. It was basic but lightweight and easy to carry on hikes. I'd built a wall from fallen deadwood held between wooden stakes around the camp to deter any predators. I fumbled for the zip on my sleeping bag in the low light and eventually found it and unzipped it. I took off my boots and prepared to get in, very tired from the day of walking and woodcutting to make my camp. As I climbed in and closed my eyes, I heard a sudden noise from the treetops. It sounded as though every bird in the woods was flying away. A great flapping of wings and the odd squawk of warning prompted me to open my eyes. The embers from the fire were dull now, meaning that I couldn't see any of my surroundings. I've spent a lot of time in the woods and know that it would take a large predator to spook roosting birds enough to fly away en masse. I lay still and tried to listen, but I could hear nothing but the fading flaps of the birds' wings. They weren't nesting again, they were leaving the area. I heard the last of these noises and then nothing. The woods were silent, eerily silent. I don't know if you have ever spent a night in the woods, but for the first few times it is quite scary due to the various unexplained noises. Nocturnal animals prowling about, owls and rodents all make up the nighttime ambience of the woods. Over time, though, these sounds become comforting. There was nothing, no noise whatsoever. I sat up, still unable to see anything. I quietly reached over for a log to place on the embers. They were still hot enough and the log dry enough that they would catch. As my hand found a log and I began to lift it, I heard a branch snap nearby. I had made my camp in a clearing so as not to fall victim to loose tree branches falling in the wind, but all around me was dense, unkempt forest. The only path was the route that I had cut out to reach the clearing. The noise came from the path. I sat frozen, log in my hand, straining to listen. There came another crack of a branch. This did not sound like sticks breaking, but a large crack, like a branch being trodden on. This has to be a large animal to make such a noise. I strained to see in the darkness, but the embers, while low, still inhibited my night vision. It was then that the smell hit me, an overpowering stench of decay. I gagged a little, trying to remain silent, not wanting to attract any attention to my camp. I then heard a shuffling. Whatever this creature was, it was taking the path I had cut. I heard it brushing against the leaves overhanging the trail, the rustling of the low-lying leaves of the trees. Whatever it was, the creature was big, at least 7 feet, judging by the height of even the lowest trees. I noticed my breathing becoming heavier and tried to force myself to take controlled, quiet breaths. The smell of death in each breath was so thick I could taste it. That's when I saw the shadow, the unmistakable shape of a deer. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling silly to have been so frightened by such a common woodland creature that I have encountered so many times before. It stopped moving and the silence returned. So silent, it was almost deafening. It was then I noticed that I could only make out 2 legs, hind legs, but the shadow continued upwards. This deer was stood on its hind legs, its back stretched straight, its front legs and paws hung at its side. This was no deer. My mind suddenly went into overdrive. I consulted a mental image I had made of the area before the light had died, and it was surrounded by dense woodland. Impossible to run through at night without seriously injuring myself. The only way out was the path that the creature was stood on, still unmoving. I'd not been hunting on this occasion and had not brought a gun with me. I was only camping for 2 days and so had enough food and drink with me. I had a large knife, but this thought did not fill me with much hope. I decided that I would scare it away with fire. I dropped the log I was holding into the pit of embers, pushing into them a little past the cooler embers at the top. I quickly placed several more around it and then hurriedly felt around the pitch-black floor for sticks. I found a few twigs and threw them on. One of the sticks caught and a tiny flame shot up from the fire. While small, it illuminated the clearing enough for me to see the creature standing at my end of the path. I could not make out details, but I could see its shape and its antlered head, which was sniffing the air in my direction. The other twigs caught, and I saw it. It had the body of a deer, but its flesh hung from its bones. It looked as though it had been decomposing for a while, and yet here it was, trying to get my scent. Its torso was upright, its broken ribs exposed through the rotting flesh of its chest. The head was the most disturbing. Much of its skull was showing, but its antlers had remained intact. Its head hung to its left side as if its neck was broken. Its eyes, or the space where its eyes had once been, reflected a bright red in the light of the fire. It looked as though there was something inside it wearing it like a costume. It opened its jaw and, head hanging to one side, it let out a scream. The noise was nothing like a deer, nothing like I've heard from any animal I have ever seen. I felt it all the way through me, a long undulating noise, high-pitched and shrill. My skin felt like ice, and I remember screaming, "Run," in my head. All care for the dangerous terrain surrounding me gone from my mind. I couldn't move. I was frozen, sitting in my camp, staring at the monstrosity before me. It took a step toward me when two of the logs caught fire, flames leaping up. The creature stopped and swung its head around to look at the fire, then back at me. It was at this point I thought I had a chance. The fire seemed to have scared it. I was wrong, and it launched itself at me with amazing speed, probably only 20 feet away now. I finally found my ability to move and jumped up and sprinted in the other direction. I reached the tree line, and without looking back, I jumped into it, holding my arms up in front of my face to shield my eyes from the many sticks and plants. I didn't make it far. I ran into a large branch and fell over. I wanted to look behind me, but I could not bring myself to. Instead, I scrabbled underneath the branch and started running again on the other side. I hit 3 more branches in the darkness, and the last one hit me in the chest and winded me. I lay on the ground trying to catch my breath, thankful that I could no longer taste the awful taste of rotten deer flesh. I tried to breathe quietly, trying to listen for sounds around me. The woods were still quiet, but I could hear periodic crashes of a large creature, presumably searching for me in the darkness. The crashes were off in the wrong direction, though, and seemed to be getting further away, not closer. I lay in this spot for what felt like eternity, but was probably about 2 to 3 hours, judging by the light. I finally heard a little forest critter scurrying through the undergrowth, then another, then an owl hoot. It was clear that the predator had left the area. I didn't go back to my stuff. I stood up and headed straight for the nearest edge of the woods. I picked up a large branch as a weapon and slowly picked my way through the woods. I reached the exit at what looked like around 4 a.m., the sun starting to rise again, but not yet visible. I walked over to my car. It was just as I had left it. I opened the door, and as I did, a smell of rotten flesh suddenly hit me. I slammed the door, started the engine, and drove out of there. My wheels span on the forest floor as I revved the car too hard. I didn't care, I just wanted to be away. I glanced in my rearview mirror just as I was leaving the parking area and saw it running across the middle of the car park behind me. Its running looked awkward, yet it was still so fast. I put my foot to the floor and didn't look back again. Thank you, and please feel free to like this video if you enjoyed it. I'll be uploading new stories daily, so subscribe to stay tuned. Until tomorrow, and don't forget, stay vigilant and stay safe.